Hey guys, how are all of you doing? Hope fine, and yes, this is the next part of Game of Shadow in Naruto world. Where I am in the Naruto world. I have a name that isn't mine and I have a really nerfed version of the gamer. Is that all? Am I forgetting something? Right, inventory. At that I received yet another disappointment. Let's start without any delay. When did this become easy? IG wondered out loud as he wrote down in his notebook. He felt it was a somewhat justified question, really. After all, he was referring to jutsu creation, a subject that had given him no small amount of stress at some point. He remembered it, how much he'd had to work at the start, when he'd been tasked with creating the void. And then he compared it with how he was now, though, with probably more original jutsu than not. He wasn't really sure about that, but he wasn't keen on checking either way. Sometimes I wish other people could hear your thoughts, Kij commented then, sounding a little annoyed. If only just to see them react when you say stuff like that. I have to reluctantly agree with Kij, Hakai said, as if it pained her. You do have a very skewed view of some things, IG. Not that I don't see why you do, but it's both amusing and a little annoying. Sachigumo, darling that she was, simply barked happily. She probably didn't even understand much of what they were saying, if IG was to take a guess. Either that, or she didn't care. It wasn't like she was dumb, after all, but she still seemed to act like that sometimes. He supposed she had priorities as to what she was smart about and what not. Never change, Sachi, he thought with a smile on his face that widened when she replied with another bark. Then, with a sigh, he cracked his neck, deciding to take a little break from his notes. Almost distractedly, he turned to see the wires around him. They were burning brightly, as they had been for some time now. Literally at that, since he was practicing chakra flow, something he'd mastered some time ago already. Well, he'd mastered lightning, but he was working on fire now. Chakra flow, fire LVL5. Technique with which the user can channel elemental chakra into weapons to grant them special enhancements. Increased chances of the target continued burning by 25%. Consumption 8 chakra points per second. It wasn't the fastest of progresses, but IG wasn't too worried about that. It was more of a thing he did to multitask, really. He wasn't sure in which moment it would be more useful than lightning, really. He supposed he could use fire whenever he was against an air release user, but even then chakra flow wouldn't be the best option. The elemental nature worked better when it was thrown against air techniques, after all. Hell, he was working on fire techniques with his jutsu creation projects for a reason, after all. Well, that and for Kanon. He didn't really remember if she was actually weak to fire, and neither did his notes, but he didn't see why not. Then again, the world he was part of hardly followed logic at the best of times. Considering that and that paper had some very glaringly obvious weaknesses, he had to consider that they might not actually work. IG could only hope that if it was resistant to fire, it wasn't completely so. That would suck. How's this looking, Hakai? He asked his jutsu assistant. I think it's going well so far, she replied, but he could almost hear her eyes narrowing. And don't call me assistant. Yes. Then they heard Kij snickering, which brought both of them to stop and focus on him. IG couldn't really see inside his mindscape unless he went in, but he still had a pretty good idea of what was going on. Like the fact that Kij gulped under his sister's gaze. Shaking his head, he went back to work. Oh. Honestly, I was expecting worse, IG commented, looking around. I know, right? Taeya replied with a smirk. They were currently looking at the living arrangements that Konoha had procured for his team. Or most of them, at least. After all, Sasori hadn't even been given a chance just yet, understandably. As for Tamrai and Yujito, they had been given a place to stay before too, but theirs was temporary, of course. As for the 3X Sound Ninja, well, they'd been given a house to stay at together. It was about the same as the one Naruto and Ig himself had been given to live in, really. That was why he was surprised, he supposed. We have a garden though, he thought, holding back a chuckle. It wasn't the only difference, of course. The place his team had been given was worse than the house he and his brother, and Karen now, lived in. It was smaller, it had less furniture, and Ig was pretty sure more ninja lived around. He wouldn't be surprised if there was an Anbu/root place somewhere close. He was expecting that, actually. Not bad, he nodded, looking around. Not bad at all. All this enough for you three? He asked, turning towards the X-Sound Ninja who were looking around too. Well, I could use a... Yes, it's fine, Jirobo told him with a nod, cutting off Taeya and completely ignoring the heated glare the girl directed his way. I knew I liked him for a reason, Ig thought with a grin. And it's not because he's the most calm of the bunch. Hakai asked, and he could almost see the smile and the raised eyebrow. That too, he admitted. Good to know, he said out loud, earning a huff from the only female in the group at the moment. Well, I'll give you guys some time to get settled. I think we can skip today's training. At that, all three of them sagged in relief. You are mean, Ig commented, sounding positively delighted. I'm sure I don't know what you are talking about, Ig thought, highly amused before opening his mouth to speak out loud. We'll just have to up training a little tomorrow to make up for it. He definitely didn't enjoy the way their faces paled. Not at all. Oh. You know, I thought we were done with this, Ig said to the not-so-empty air around him. He received no response, obviously, but he had an expected one. Besides, he was focused on his task for the moment, which was to analyze the sheets in front of him. Another Danza/root assigned little piece of homework had been delivered that night. It had caught Ig off guard, if he was honest. After all, as he said, he thought they were finished with that phase in his training/grooming. Evidently, he'd been wrong. He'd obediently sat and read through the assignments though. Mostly because he had nothing better to do at the moment, if he was honest. As he did so though, he found that he didn't mind, really. It was almost relaxing, doing that. There was no fight, no great threat on the horizon with those papers. Just issues here and there, issues that wouldn't spell doom for everyone he cared about either. Problems that he could sit and ponder on for the night, for a day or two or even more. It was nice, really. The best part though, was that if he did something wrong, nothing major would happen. It'd maybe cause more problems to deal with, but it wouldn't cause something that would haunt him or anything of the sort. Man, never thought I'd think paperwork was nice, Ig thought with a wry smile. But there he was, almost enjoying himself as he read through reports and thought over issues. It wasn't a thrilling activity, to be sure, but he didn't need more of those, honestly. Furthermore, it was boring, very much so, but he found that he didn't mind. It let his mind be quiet for once, without worries or plans for future conflicts with S-ranked threats. That's not a half-bad idea, Kij pointed out as they read through a specific part, a suggestion made by the Civilian Council, of all people. Tweak it a little here, a little there. I can see it, Hakai agreed, and IG could see her nodding inside his head. That was another thing in favor of the paperwork, actually. Since he didn't have to do it alone, it wasn't as boring as it had been before. The twins don't call us that. Were there to offer their help. It really improved his performance with the assignments, and that was without their advice on top of that. Just having them there to keep him from boring himself to death was helpful. Yes, we are awesome. So, about the paper? Kij asked, and IG could see his raised eyebrow even from outside the mindscape. Okay, let's tackle that then, he said, reading it over. Yeah, there was somewhat of a good idea in there. Hidden by civilian council bullshit, but it was there. They just needed to make it actually good. Oh God, he got worse, someone breathed out. You have no idea, bimbo number 3, someone else muttered. It's only the beginning. IG-2. Let us down, we've been hanging here for like half an hour. Naruto shouted, only to get a mild shock. Nothing too bad, really, IG wasn't a monster, after all. Maybe. He was busy though, how dare they interrupt his meditation. He was trying to train senjutsu a little bit, couldn't they be silent? If they didn't want to be hanging from ninja wire, they should have done better during the fight. Honestly, sometimes it seemed that the only decent ninja around was Yujito, and she'd barely gotten herself out of that cruel and unusual punishment. You know, Kumo is rather ruthless when training, said woman muttered from where she sat, off to the side. She was meditating too, from what IG gathered through his web sense and senjutsu. Or, at least, she had been. Now she was just sitting there. But you reach new heights on that front, I have to admit. Thanks, IG said with a smile. It wasn't a compliment though, she whispered under her breath, and he pretended like he didn't hear. He'd just have to remember that during the next training session. Oh, he so heard you, Taeya gleefully called from where she hung from a tree. You are so getting it, bimbo number 2. The silence that Yujito replied with was very telling, even if IG could feel the blood leaving her face and the sweat forming on her skin. Yeah, the next training session would be fun, like always. Maybe even more entertaining than that, if he really wanted to push her. He had to, really, since she was a Jinchuriki out in the field. It was only right for him to push her more, right? It was just so that she would be prepared for Akatsuki. He couldn't have her not be ready in case she became a target out there. Yeah, he was a nice leader like that. For the moment though. There are 5 ways for you guys to get out of those threads, he announced, since they didn't even seem to be trying to get out. Find them. So, that's why we've been hanging for longer than usual, Kabuto grumbled, and IG could feel his eyes darting around, searching for the answer to the puzzle he'd been presented with. I see. Is bribery one of them? Ino asked, half joking. IG almost smiled. They were all getting down to it now, he could almost feel the gears turning in their heads. Good. He remained silent though. He wouldn't be giving them any other clues after that. He was already a little disappointed that they hadn't realized what the exercise was, or that it was one to begin with. Then again, he could excuse that, since it was something new. Oh man, this is great, Kij said inside his mind, and IG wasn't so sure, but he thought the man was eating something. Popcorn. He wouldn't put it past him, really. He is Hakai confirmed, sounding supremely disappointed. Man, what I wouldn't give to have some of that too, he thought to himself. You are both children, Hakai added with a huff, rolling her eyes at them. Oh. Yeah, I think this works, IG commented with a smirk, inspecting his arms. Fearless leader, I just want you to know that I hate you, Taeya called, her voice the epitome of exasperation. Can you stop becoming more ridiculous by the second? Or, you say the sweetest things, Taeya, truly, he replied, turning to grin towards his team. Not that they could see it. After all, he was covered from head to toe by one of his new techniques. This was a session to work on his fire release, as it turned out. Fire release, Sunfire Cape Level 1. B-rank technique with which the user covers themselves in fire and increases their capabilities. Increases stats of the user by 1%. Increased chances of anyone touching the cape to continue burning by 5%. Hand seals 10. Consumption 20 chakra points per second. Plus creator bonus. Increases burning chance by 25%. Increases stat effect by 25%. It's a little weird that the first B-rank techniques I made were fire release, of all things he mused to himself. I mean, you all but jumped straight to a or up with everything else, Kij pointed out, and IG could practically see the unimpressed expression on the man's face. The wire techniques are C and down though, IG protested weakly. Well, he said out loud. You guys coming? He asked, hitting his left palm with his right fist. He felt like throwing some punches that day, and Sunfire Cape made it all the more fun. Lightning cackled at his feet, ready to flicker. No one in his team moved for a moment, before Yujito surged forward, spearheading the battle as she usually did. IG supposed that made sense, since she must have been trained like that. It fit rather well, since she was a Jinchuriki. He also supposed she wanted to test his fire cloaking against her own, not that his stood a chance against Baiju-powered flames, honestly. His assumption was soon proved right, at least until Sachigumo started powering the technique instead of him. Then things changed, because his technique stopped being pushed around by the woman's fire. He could tell that the shift took the woman by surprise. An opening that he took full advantage of to punch her away. Gyrobo and Kabuto had run around, trying to flank him. Sasori, meanwhile, floated his body up to attack from above. Taeya was already probably boosting everyone, since she'd long since given up on putting a genjutsu on him during fights. She hadn't stopped trying to find a way, but she'd accepted that it would take her quite a while, if not forever. For the moment, boosting her allies was all she could do. That and give advice and orders. Tamrai was right there with her, even more limited in her fighting options. After all, using her fan against him as he was wouldn't be a good idea. It'd probably do more harm than good, considering that her teammates were surrounding him. Thus, she did what she could, flying on top of her fan as she looked upon the battlefield, looking for openings for the team. They'd had to work on giving her more options besides wind, that was for sure. Thus, IG pushed the two women out of his mind, half paying attention to them in case they did something unexpected. Meanwhile, he concentrated on the fighters upon him, trading blows with them while he used his wires to make up where he couldn't with his limbs. 4 against 1 wasn't a very fair fight, at least considering that he was keeping off most of his buffs. He didn't even have World Ender up, trusting that Kabuto would patch him up if he needed it. Why not try that out, huh? Might as well go for a full testing session, right? Hakai suggested, making IG's grin widen even more. Now, there was an idea. Why do you hate them so, sister of mine? Kij asked, although he sounded more amused than anything else. Shut up. IG simply tuned them out before they could get started, using 3 flickers to buy himself some time as he ran through hand seals. Tamrai shouted a warning then, but by the time Yujito reacted and rushed him, he'd finished. Chakra surged in a familiar way, but with very different results than usual. Fire exploded outwards, but, in contrast with Sunfire Cape's contained flames, these ones didn't stop. They rushed outwards, eager and hungry to consume his surroundings, and he let them. Fire release, conflagration level 1. B-rank technique with which the user covers the surrounding area on fire. Increased chances of anyone affected to continue burning by 5%. Range 10 meters. Hand seals 40. Consumption 29 chakra points per second. Plus creator bonus. Increases range effect by 50%. Fire covered the area around IG, and he almost laughed. It was exhilarating, using big techniques. He felt like a bit of a child, but it just felt so amazing. To have such power over what surrounded him. He could definitely see the appeal of going full show even in serious battles. Now that he thought about it. Come at me with all you have, guys. He called to his team, who seemed to pause at his words. I want to go all out. This'll be fun. Oh shit, someone said. He wasn't sure who. He felt it then, Yujito letting loose. But it wouldn't be enough. Not with World Ender, his energy skills, Tsuchigumo and Senjutsu. No, they'd need more. Let loose, he ordered, grinning from ear to ear. Use the seals, he told Jirobo and Teiya. He'd had them meditating for a while now, they could use them without being influenced now, he knew. Not for long, but it was something. He felt them, through the natural energy, the shift and the slight corruption of their chakra paths. He'd have to arrange a chat with Jiraiya at some point. Or wait until Naruto was advanced enough to tinker with their cursed marks. If they could turn them into something less twisted, then that would be great. It was unlikely that they would be able to replicate the effect, but IG cared little for that. He just wanted his team to be at their best. Now, let's try again, yeah? He asked, chuckling slightly before they jumped at him. Oh. IG walked solemnly through the halls, his team following dutifully and in silence. He didn't blame them for that, he'd have kept his mouth shut if his leader looked like he did at the moment. IG just wasn't having a good day either, which certainly helped with their reactions. He was distracted too, which was why he almost missed the looks people were giving him. Almost, but not quite. There were people that were afraid, there were people that were awed, there were people that were somewhere in between. Considering that he was in the Hokage Tower, IG had to wonder what that meant. Why, exactly, were they looking at him like that? He could think of several reasons himself, but he didn't know how public any of those things were, so. Maybe it was better to just focus on what was going on, all things considered. Gee, you think? Kij asked, and IG could see the male twin rolling his eyes at him. Don't. The man in his mind started protesting, before just giving up. Ah, whatever. You are part of the family, Kij, accept it, IG told him, holding back a grin on the outside. Still, I'd appreciate it if you didn't call me this thing's twin, IG Hakai commented. Oi, who are you calling a thing? You, of course, she replied. Sachi. Your siblings are being dumb, you know what to do, IG called, receiving a bark in response. No, wait. It was just a joke. Ah, music to IG's ears. If only that were enough to cheer him up though. Instead, His expression flattened even more as he nodded his head at one of the guards outside Hiruzen's door and he walked in. He'd been called, and considering what it was about, he didn't even bother with the formalities. The Hokage wouldn't care for it regardless, and it was highly unlikely that he'd interrupt anything. "IG, thanks for coming so quickly," the old man greeted them with a nod, his expression almost the same as the boys'. IG, for his part, gave the man a smile that held no joy behind it. "So, better to get on with it, isn't it?" Hiruzen asked, all but deflating on his chair. "I think so," old man IG replied. "According to the information that we've managed to gather, together with the intel Sasori has provided us, if we can trust it," Hiruzen started, making the boy glance towards his puppet master teammate. The man, under his gaze, remained stoic. IG almost believed that front, if not for his web sense telling him of a slight shift in the mechanisms inside the puppet body. He turned his gaze to Hiruzen. He must have seen something because he continued then. "It's all but confirmed that Akatsuki is making a move for the Seven Tails Jinchuriki. And we are being sent there, we know." "Get on with it already," Teiya grumbled. Instead of scolding her, IG simply gave a half-smile to Hiruzen. He didn't particularly disagree with his teammate, he'd admit. "And you are being sent there," the Hokage agreed, returning the smile at him. "If there's anything we can do, some actual support would be nice." Teiya IG called then, just to prevent her from speaking more than she already had. He didn't mind her words, and he knew Hiruzen didn't either, but there was no reason to let her do as she pleased, too much, at least. Last thing he needed was for her to do something like that with someone less understanding. The girl huffed behind him. "This is all the information we've gathered," Tsunade told him, walking from where she'd been standing to the side and behind Hiruzen and handing him a file. Opening it briefly, he saw who it was that they suspected was lurking in Takegakyo. Haiden and Kakuzu, which, all in all, wasn't as bad as it could be. They were actually the easiest pair of the Akatsuki he knew, IG suspected, even counting Deidara and Sasori. This could have been much worse, all things considered. After a glimpse, he passed the file to Tamrai, who was standing to his right. "Not gonna read it?" Tsunade asked, with a raised eyebrow. "I'll check it in depth later. For now, I'll leave it to Tamrai to study it and share it with the team. Have better things to do?" Tsunade asked, before IG bathed the room in bloodlust. "As a matter of fact, I do," IG said curtly. "You know what to do, guys. I'll see you at the training grounds. You'll let Sasori." "Shut up," he growled at the woman. "If Sasori does anything, he knows there's not a hole on the face of Earth that he can hide from me, and that's all he needs to know about that. Honestly, you should be more concerned about me, because you are getting on my nerves." "And after I taught you?" Tsunade asked, raising an eyebrow. "Taught?" he scoffed. "You gave me books and a few half-assed pointers here and there. If that's you teaching, I pity any student you take." "Ha!" She laughed then, giving him a smile. "If I do become Hokage, I think I'll keep you around. Much better than most of the rest, I gotta say. Just don't make a habit of annoying me," he told her flatly as he relaxed. "Now, I have somewhere to go." Sighing, he turned to Hiruzen, who had been watching the whole interaction with a neutral expression. "See you later, old man," IG said simply, with a small smile and a slight nod that the Hokage returned. "Be safe, IG." "Ha!" As if that was even in the cards, the boy replied with a shake of his head as he turned and walked out the door. Don't take so long this time, okay? Naruto said with a grin that, for once, looked rather strained. IG got it though, the whole group looked rather grim. Before Iwa, they looked worried, nervous. At that moment, however, they looked somber, resigned. It was what it was though, there was nothing to be done about it. I'll try, IG replied, giving him a squeeze on the arm, before he walked away. IG, he heard Sasuke call then, almost catching him off guard. Everyone had said their goodbyes already. He'd thought that, like last time, would be it. There was no need to prolong it and make it harder for everyone. When he turned around, he found himself face to face with the Uchiha, standing in front of him and away from the group. It took IG one look to realize that it was intentional, which had him send his own team away with a wave of his hand. Then, giving his whole attention to Sasuke, he nodded encouragingly. If the hesitant way he shifted from foot to foot and kept looking around was any indication, he was struggling quite a bit with words at that moment. I just don't hold back, okay? Sasuke said, and it sounded about as awkward as those words could get, which confused IG to no end. The Uchiha wasn't known for this sort of behavior, that was for sure. I mean. The boy's face twisted into a grimace before he took a deep breath in and let it out. I know that Itachi is in the group you are fighting. I was there when they went after Naruto. Now that IG could understand, and it certainly helped fit several pieces of this puzzle into place. But surely he was wrong, right? Surely Sasuke wasn't talking about what he thought he was. If you see him, fight him, at your best, Sasuke all but demanded. I want to kill him myself, but I don't want you to die because you were holding back, okay? He asked, almost pleading. I don't want to lose anyone anymore. Please, don't die. I'll do my best, IG replied, because it was as much as he could promise, all things considered. He wanted to tell him more. To tell Sasuke about his brother, and what had likely happened. It would surely help somehow, somewhat, if delivered the right way. But he didn't know if he was right. He'd seen so many things change from before he became IG Sata, that he wasn't sure if what he knew was right or wrong. Maybe he could do something about that though. Kill him, if you have to, Sasuke whispered, apparently sending all his rules out the window and hugging IG. But do come back. Of course I'll come back. We still have to find you a girlfriend. Wasn't that part of your dream too? IG told him, a grin appearing on his face as he heard him groan. You had to ruin it, didn't you? Sasuke asked, but despite his words and his grimace, a glint of humor could be seen in his eyes. Just go away already. Take care, Sasuke. And make sure the others don't do anything stupid, IG called as the other boy started walking back to the group, who were looking at him, wide-eyed. I don't think that's even possible, Sasuke replied, and IG chuckled. Fair enough. Finished with the sappy goodbyes, fearless leader? Teiya asked, laughter in her voice. Or, are you jealous, Teiya? I can give you a hug too, if you want, IG asked, which made the girl shut up instantly and give him her best glare. Many people would have been frightened by that look. Unfortunately for her, he wasn't one of those. Instead he just gave her a smirk. You have to teach me your secrets one day, IG Jirobo commented. One day, Jirobo, one day, the boy replied with a shake of his head. For now, I fear she'll rebel if I do that. She could take away the music, you know. I can't risk that. TCH, gotta wait, I guess, the orange-haired boy lamented, although IG could see the corner of his mouth twitching. Maybe I can find my own method one day. Keep dreaming, Fatus. One can only hope, Gyrobo continued, completely ignoring Taeya. Indeed, the rest of the team agreed easily. I hate you all, the redhead grumbled. Man, I get the feeling that you guys don't like Taeya, IG commented idly. Weird, right? Silence. No offense to you intended, IG Satisasari started then. But you do realize that you are the only one that likes having her around, right? I mean, there's Yuno. He pointed out, receiving silence again for a good moment. True enough. That's right. Ha, had forgotten. Fair. When are we playing again, by the way? I hate you all. So much. We love you too, Taeya IG replied, bringing the girl into a one-armed hug that had her struggling hopelessly against it. We are just joking. Sure. Tamrai mumbled sarcastically, earning herself a raised eyebrow from IG that had her rolling her eyes. Anyway, if we cover a good enough distance, we can play while we rest, IG commented. Hell yes. Tamrai celebrated. She'd become somewhat of a fan of the game. Unless, that is. And Taeya can stay out if she wants. Hell yes. The redhead celebrated this time. Fuck. Tamrai cursed. After all, she was the second person with the worst luck when it came to You are so childish sometimes, Sasori muttered, shaking his head. Says the guy that refuses to play anymore, Yujito pointed out, receiving only silence in response. After all, the puppet master's luck had been somewhat good for a few games. Then his beginner's luck ran out and he revealed that he was somehow worse than Taeya on that front. They have nothing on Kij though. I hate you. Sachigumo just barked a laugh at that. Oh. Already missing your girlfriend, Four Eyes, Taeya asked, looking at Kabuto with a grin as he patted Yuki. The Mednin simply rolled his eyes at her, although IG had to admit that he did look more subdued. Maybe it wasn't what the redhead was implying, or maybe it was, but something was definitely going on there. Something the matter, Kabuto? He decided to ask in the end, when it became apparent that the Mednin wouldn't deign their genjutsu expert with an answer. Not that IG could blame him, really. He'd ignored Taeya more than a little bit himself, after all. No, it's just. I'm getting used to some things, is all Kabuto replied then, and IG considered that answer for a moment. The man was certainly changed from what he'd known about him and even what he'd seen of him. He couldn't quite point out what, but slowly, Kabuto had turned into someone else. IG guessed it wasn't a stretch to think that the guy himself was struggling with that, then. Yeah, being a person is hard, isn't it? Taeya asked then, but contrary to what one would expect, it came out with a lot less bite to it. Even the girl herself seemed surprised by that, judging by the look on her face. Well, if it's any consolation, you are getting there, IG commented, looking at the 3X Sound Ninja. They'd come a long way from the trio he'd gathered for his Suicide Squad. They actually looked like a team now, surprisingly enough. The encouraging words are appreciated, Gyrobo said, nodding in IG's direction. Or, I knew you liked us, fearless leader Taeya exclaimed, pulling him into a one-armed hug that had him rolling his eyes. Next thing we know, we are having teary goodbyes like the brats back in Konoha. We can do that if you want, he offered with a deadpan. Nah, she waved off instantly, letting go of him. Besides, I wouldn't want the bimbos and Mr. Freaky to feel left out. Do you have to be so unbearably annoying all the time? Tamrai growled. It's a gift, Taeya shot back with a grin. One would think you'd have gotten used to her antics at this point, honestly, IG commented, getting a nod from Gyrobo. At that, the Sunanin deflated. I try, but she just really knows how to annoy me, I guess Tamrai grumbled under her breath. I wonder if these kinds of interactions are normal in all groups. I don't remember it like this when I was a Suna Ninja, Sasori commented, although it didn't seem directed at anybody in particular. Regardless, Tamrai tensed. Understandable, really, considering what Sasori had done to Suna. They weren't exactly normal back in Akatsuki either, really. Things have changed, it seems. I think it's more about you joining weird groups, Mr. Freaky Teiya pointed out, although IG could see that she wasn't particularly relaxed around the puppet master. She was making a valiant effort though. I guess you do have a point, Sasori replied with a nod. Besides, Fearless Leader couldn't have anything normal happen in his life if he tried, the redhead commented. She does have a point. Shut up, Hakai, IG grumbled to himself. Oh. You can do better than that, guys, come on, IG urged his team, who groaned in unison as they pushed themselves to their feet. The only ones not complaining were Yujito, who had infinite stamina, basically, and Sasori, since he didn't feel exhaustion nor pain anymore. Why don't you follow these two's example? Because they are absolute freaks of nature. Kabuto asked as he readied himself to rush back into the battle. Which was a fair reply, really. There was definitely nothing normal about the Jinchuriki and the puppet master. Still, you gotta keep up, guys, IG called with a grin. I know you can do better than this. Goddamn slave driver. One of these days. A lot of talk and little fight there, Teiya. Back it up, will you? How I fucking hate you, just saying, Fearless Leader. I love you too. So, will you just stand there? IG asked, blinking as he turned to the side as he smacked Yujito into the ground. That tickled, he commented as the wind pushed his hair to the side. Is that all? He asked Tamrai, who was snarling at him. Fucking ridiculous, the Jinchuriki grumbled as she pushed herself up. Maybe you guys will take this seriously if I up my game. IG wondered out loud, making all of them freeze. 2 flickers later, he stood in a somewhat clear space going through hand seals. Goddamn night, Teiya grumbled as Sunfire Cape formed around IG. Gyrobo, what are you waiting for? You gotta try your stuff, right, Fatus? She called then, and sure enough, her long-time teammate went through hand seals himself. As he finished, his body got covered in earth and stone. A little technique that he and IG had worked out together, based off Sunfire Cape, simply named Granite Shield. Now that's more like it, IG said, dodging Sasori's attempt at skewering him with his puppet blades while trading blows with both Gyrobo and Yujito. Meanwhile, Kabuto, Tamrai and Teiya were off to the side, looking for openings. Fire release, Sunfire Cape has gone up a level. Tilting his head to the side, he dodged a stone the size of his head being shot at him. Ha, Gyrobo taught Tamrai a trick, ha. He mused to himself with a grin. He'd wondered how long it would take her to start looking for ways around her weakness against fire users. It seemed that she'd already started taking her first steps in that direction. Now, you just have to show them that they are quite far from challenging you, Kij commented, obviously quite happy with just spectating the massacre. You wanna give it a go, Hakai? What? Wait, I can. Sure, she replied instantly, before her brother could protest. Thus, IG receded to the back of his own mind as she took over. It was quite interesting to be a spectator in his own body, especially during a fight. It was also nice as a great learning experience, really. He could witness what he could do if he changed his style this or that way. The twins had the same tools he did, but they acted differently, even from each other. Thus, giving them a chance to fight in his stead actually quite helped IG himself. It allowed him to try different things without having to actually try to change his own style. Bah, what's so impressive about this? Kij grumbled, but IG just ignored him. He knew why the male twin wasn't a fan of Hakai's fighting style. Where IG liked to think he was a balanced fighter with his own tools, Kij loved jutsu, especially elemental ones. He would throw lightning and fire release around like they were going out of style. Even genjutsu suited his tastes just fine. So long as it was flashy enough, he liked them. Although Kij would prefer a different description for his style, IG was sure. Hakai, as she was showing, liked his more subtle techniques. She seemed to quite enjoy using the thread techniques, which was interesting. IG made sure to follow everything she did, trying to see if there were ideas he could implement. Especially since she seemed to go for a more subtle approach. IG was pretty sure he was good at stealthily using his threads, but that was often because he gave people other things to focus on rather than the thin wires. Why didn't I think of that? He mused as he saw Hakai burrow some threads in the ground. Not much, just enough that they were hidden under the not quite solid earth surface. She didn't do that with all of them though, only about half, actually, which he guessed was the plan all along. It required a bit more micromanaging than he was comfortable with in a fight, but maybe there was merit to those kinds of actions. IG would have to see if he could train in those. Or maybe leave the twins to perfect their own styles and swap between himself and them. He was sure they would jump at the chance to be in control and fight. Damn right we would, Kij replied to the not actually voiced idea. We would like that, IG Hakai agreed, giving an almost imperceptible nod as she continued fighting the team. She deactivated Sunfire Cape, the technique a little too distracting for what she was trying to do. She needed to put all her focus on her threads. Besides, Ninja Wire was all she needed, really. With the handful of new techniques IG had made to use through the metallic strings, she didn't need anything else. All this gave IG an idea though. Reluctantly, he pulled his consciousness fully into the mindscape. Ha, I didn't expect you to actually come here. Got tired of the show? I know it's boring, but that's got a sting for Hakai, Kij commented with a lazy smile, while Sachigumo enthusiastically greeted IG with a tongue to the face. I had an idea that I thought both you and Hakai would enjoy, he commented as he started walking, a hand firmly placed on Sachigumo's head as she walked beside him. Kij, for his part, soon followed, letting out a curious sound. Eventually, they stood outside one of the training grounds in his mindscape. Most of them rarely saw much use, besides animal creation experiments and such, which was why Sachigumo instantly grew interested. Unfortunately, IG had no plans of creating more prey for her. At least not at that very moment. Sorry, girl, but this is for the twins, he told her, quite enjoying the way Kij twitched at being called that. Giving the chakra beast a consoling pat on the head, IG turned back to the training grounds. Flexing his mindscape powers a bit, he twisted the reality of the place. The start was simple enough, an easy change that was barely noticeable at first. Kij's frown told him that he'd noticed what he was doing though, but the twin remained silent for the moment. What was he doing? Simple, he'd taken away Kich's and Hakai's control over his mindscape while inside that specific training ground. Unless, that is, he allowed it in an emergency or something. That was almost all he needed to do, really. However, he decided to take it a step further. Outside the training ground, he shaped two humanoid forms. Soon, it became apparent what they were. Copies of himself, with all his equipment and capabilities. He also designed them to adapt as he progressed. However, he gave them no consciousness. He was rather nervous and wary of putting more AI inside his mindscape, really. IG considered himself lucky that he was doing well despite Kich's, Hakai's and Tsuchigumo's existences. No need to tempt his luck, really. Anyway, the IG copies weren't for that anyway. They were meant to have no mind of their own. Instead, he made it so that they could be possessed by Kich and Hakai. Oh, I get it, Kich mused, a smile growing on his face. Literally turning it into a training ground, huh? I thought you'd appreciate it, IG replied with a grin of his own. It was a shame that he couldn't quite turn off his control over his mindscape, not that he wanted to. However, that limitation meant that there wouldn't be any mindscape training for him, sadly. That didn't include Hakai and Kich though, which was where this idea had come from. He wasn't sure how much use this would get, or how much he'd let the twins come out and play, but he wasn't losing anything by creating it. If he gained something from that, it would only be a plus for him. Now, back to Hakai's fight. As he looked back to the outside world, he saw that the female twin had already made quick work of his team. Well, I guess I better take over then. Oh. Man, our missions are shit, but at least we can fucking travel without anything going to hell, Taeya said as they approached Takegakyo. IG couldn't exactly fault her there, really. It was a relief to at least be able to at least travel without trouble. Their missions were plenty dangerous enough as they were. The surroundings were not that notable, IG thought, which wasn't surprising. He'd already studied the place to no end, to be prepared for this. Takegakyo wasn't all that impressive, which made sense, really. After all, this was a minor village. How they had gotten their hands on a Jinchuriki, IG didn't know. History was a little unclear on that front, he'd found. He did suspect that there must have been an agreement back in the day or something. It had been a prominent village back then, which he supposed had to be the reason, even if they'd kind of fallen from grace. Regardless. Well, we are almost there, IG said, making all of them stop in different nearby tree branches. You know what to do, he added simply. Suicide Squad, you heard, fearless leader, Chop Chop, Taeya announced, looking like she was barely containing her laughter. Everyone rolled their eyes at her, before disappearing. With a sigh, IG closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, he created as many clones as he could and scattered them around. There would be a lot of waiting around this time around too, but differently from before, they didn't have the village's permission to actually be there. Hiruzen had been careful not to say that out loud, even during their meetings, but it had been clear in the papers IG had been given. Takegakyo didn't even know they were being sent there to keep Akatsuki away from their Jinchuriki. They didn't want them there, stating that they had the protection of their asset covered. Emphasis in the word asset, at least in IG's mind. He honestly couldn't fathom why they were doing that. It was stupid. They were a minor village at best, and that wasn't only because the land it was on was small. They might have been a big deal back when villages were just starting, but now. People honestly forgot that they were there sometimes. considering that they had one of the most powerful weapons. Even if IG disliked referring to Jinchurikis like that at their disposal, that said enough, really. To make things worse, Takegakyo seemed to have started putting all their village's focus on Fu, the current Seven Tails container. It seemed like they had decided that she was the only real chance they had at being on the map again, with all that was going on outside and inside their village. Between what was happening between the major villages and the struggles Takegakyo itself was going through to get some decent ninja out there, they were grasping at straws. And that led to a mistake. Maybe there were people out there that thought it was a good idea to pressure a Jinchuriki like Takegakyo was. After all, they were supposed to be a weapon for their village, right? Those people were idiots. Even Danza agreed, or maybe he'd just done so to get IG to do what he wanted. Either way, the satyr's mind had been made. A part of it was that he could easily imagine Naruto going through the same thing. Both alienated, which had already happened to the blonde, and also forced into being less than a person, less than a ninja. Being considered a weapon, a thing, was something IG couldn't let happen to his brother. Fu wasn't Naruto though, but that's where another part came in. The part that thought that Takegakyo's approach gave an opening to Konoha. If they were alienating their Jinchuriki, then that gave them the chance to snatch Fu away without her even resisting. She might even be eager to go with them. IG didn't have to try too hard to convince himself then, especially since it would actually be the right thing to do. Fu would be better off in Konoha, even if there was a chance it was only slightly so. Would it be an easy thing to do? Certainly not. The standings of the major villages were shaky at best. However, Konoha was firmly on the safest side so far. Kiri owed them too much not to side with them for a good while. Suna was under their thumb, basically. Kumo didn't have any allies, or even prospects of such outside of Konoha itself. A good part of Iwa had just been saved by a Konoha nin. If there was ever a moment to strike and take a big risk big reward chance, it was then. And Konoha was taking it. First though, IG needed information. Both, to confirm that Danza hadn't lied to his face and to get more intelligence to work on. What the route leader had given him was good enough, but it might be a little outdated. He'd have to see for himself how the situation looked before doing anything. Besides, he still had the actual Akatsuki part of the mission to deal with, so having eyes around would only help. As if just dealing with them wasn't enough, he lamented with a grimace. Not only do I have to do that, but I also have to not be seen around, and I also have to see about stealing this village's Jinchuriki from under their nose. Fun stuff, huh? Kij asked, sounding amused by his annoyance. No surprises there though. It could be worse, Hakai commented, ever the optimist, if it could be called that. It could be one of the other pairs involved, she added, and he had to concede that point. Itakai and Kaizame, Pain and Kanon, any of those would have been infinitely worse than Haiden and Kakuzu. Still, the fact that the mission almost sounded easy was the part that worried him. This was Akatsuki he was dealing with. Something was going to go wrong, he just knew. What? Well, that was the real question, really. Infiltrating Taki was laughably easy, really. IG could hardly believe that was all the security there was in a ninja village, minor or not. Then again, not many people had access to senjutsu, so he guessed he couldn't really fault them all that much. However, even with liberal use of arts that few had at their disposal, it had been too easy. It had the boy a little on edge, if he was honest. Relax, that's just you, Kij told him, and IG could almost see him rolling his eyes. He's right, IG, we are good so far, Hakai agreed, and he took a deep breath in and shook off his unease. There'd been no pops between his shadow clones, which meant that his team and them had gotten in with no problem so far too. Honestly, I expected some trouble with this part, he thought to himself as he started moving through Taki in a transformation technique. It was time to put all that time of practice in Iwa to test, he supposed. He hadn't personally done that back then, but this slight change of situation taught him something. Sachigumo found it extremely amusing that people didn't know who he was and couldn't see through the disguise. Why? Neither he nor the twins had any idea, honestly, but they just basked in the little one's enjoyment. It was a delight to see her bouncing around or, in Iji's case, hear her bark forward/laugh. It was nice to keep the mood up, if nothing else. Time passed while they were in Taki, and he crossed paths with his clones and team more than once. They exchanged some information, but it was mainly things that they already knew. They also hadn't found anything about Fu in particular though, but they did find out about the situation. So, the reports are true. Taki's civilian side was alienating the Jinchuriki. To a point that was worse than Konoha with Naruto, actually, which Ig found annoying, to say the least. The fact that it wasn't a grudge or fear, but a purposeful decision only made it worse, really. They hadn't gotten much from the ninja side, but that was to be expected. Still, he had some people very experienced with espionage. He expected it wouldn't take them much to gather some intel on that front. For the moment, he kept his senjutsu active as much as possible to try and pick up something. It was his best bet, really. He might be able to go covert without too much trouble, but that and actually getting information were two very different things. Senjutsu of the spiders has gone up a level. Honestly, he didn't really need to be good at espionage, not with senjutsu available. Senjutsu of the spiders LVL 16. The user gathers and balances natural energy with their own chakra to increase physical stats and gain a sensing ability. Physical stat increase, 160%. Sensing range, 640 meters. Senjutsu gave him senses that were, all in all, terrifyingly good. Anything that happened within its range could be picked up on, anything. And the range was growing more and more as time passed and he continued leveling it up. It was really the only thing he needed to try and get some information, really. Only problem was that it was a bit overwhelming, especially when he had to try and listen in on all the conversations taking place and try to filter them. That part didn't go too well. Senjutsu sense was great when used on focused targets. All but absolute, really. However, spread out like this, that was a little more complicated. Ig saw this as a training experience, actually, which helped him deal with the headaches and frustration more than a little bit. After all, it was likely that he'd have to do more espionage missions in his life. He'd need to know how to do this better for the next time. However, it would have been nice if the first mission he had to do this wasn't so world-affecting. That was his luck though, and he'd just have to deal with it. At least Taki was nice, so there was that. It was no major village and it showed though. It wasn't as imposing as Iwa, nor as lively as Konoha. If he had to describe it though, he'd use similar words to the later, but on a smaller scale. There were trees everywhere, but much smaller than those in Konoha. There was the river, making a circle as if marking the village's location. And sometimes, there'd be the sound of the waterfall the place was named after. The people were nice and friendly. Not welcoming and warm like Konoha. Not hardened but resolute like Iwa. They were just nice. A bit plain, but overall it didn't make the experience horrible, at least. It did make it a little boring though. IG would have preferred if there was something interesting to keep him from wanting to drift off. God knew he'd have fallen asleep if not for the twins. Yes, we are a blessing from above. Focus on the conversations, IG barked at him. Maybe he was spending too much time with Sachigumo. I heard that. The man protested, as his sister giggled. IG didn't pay him too much mind though. He was fairly sure that he was complaining because if the boy himself wasn't paying attention it meant that he had to. They were all working together to pick up stuff, after all. You are not wrong, Hakai confirmed, although even she, normally calm and placid, sounded a little annoyed. Nobody was a fan of the current mission, it seemed. With any luck, it wouldn't be too long. One can only hope. Take a break, guys, IG told them, earning a sigh in relief from both. Go and keep Sachigumo some company, yeah. She must be even more bored than us since we are always busy lately. Will do, Kij replied instantly, apparently not caring that he was giving away how much he wanted to do just that. Maybe the male twin was past his denial already. He definitely is, the female twin confirmed. And stop calling us twins, she growled. IG just chuckled. Oh. Eventually, they got results out of their little operation. The only problem was that Sasori was the one that got it. He didn't expect much from Jirobo or Tamrai, but he had Kabuto and Yujito in the team too, and they were good at espionage and infiltration. It was just unfortunate, he supposed. So, with that less than ideal find, IG had to triple check to see if what the puppet master had gotten was actually something. And that's where the previously mentioned experts came in. That and lots of senjutsu usage. As it was, they at least could confirm the intel. Intel that got them on their way to Fu. Taki was making a stupid decision on how to handle their Jinchuriki, but what they were doing kind of right was that they didn't have her around like Konoha did with Naruto. Then again, Konoha could afford to have Anbu and Jounin looking after the blonde at all times. Ninja that were actually pretty good in their own right. Taki, however. They had no such thing and compensated for that by hiding the girl from the world while they tried to make her into a weapon. Am I boring you? The woman in front of IG said, in that tone that all men knew meant danger. He finished his yawn and gave her an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he said, and while Yujito didn't react in any way, he could just tell that she wanted to laugh. Man, was senjutsu always this overpowered? I don't remember it being like this in the series, he mused. Not from your notes and not from what we've gathered, Kij told him, confirming his suspicions. IG continued. Haven't been sleeping that well lately, he said as an excuse for his poor behavior. It's fine. You've had a lot of work to do, haven't you? Yujito asked under her disguise. With the scope of their search area shrinking, the group had started doing things in pairs and such from time to time, especially when they came across each other. So far, IG had been Jirobo's younger brother, Teiya's twin brother and Kabuto's best friend. Was it a little weird? Definitely, but it was how the job went sometimes. IG was just glad that he seemed to be good at acting. However, he'd almost been a bit caught off guard when Yujito decided to play couple though, he'd admit, but he'd learned to just roll with it before. He was almost positive she'd done so to mess with him. We found something, IG heard Teiya say in his ear, and he almost reacted. Almost, but not quite, since he'd picked up her approach with senjutsu. Instead, he just looked at Yujito. She'd gotten the message too. Then, their genjutsu specialist started relaying the information she'd gotten with Damrai. Now that's a pair I'd like to see, Hakai commented, clearly amused by that particular combination. IG couldn't really blame her. It did sound like a disaster waiting to happen. It turned out that they hadn't actually been the ones to find something. Jirobo and Kabuto did, actually, and the chain of communication had brought it to Teiya and she to him. From there, it turned out that the little byplay of yawning and whatnot was useful, since Yujito took that as an opportunity to suggest they go somewhere else. They were getting closer. As for what they would do once they found Fu, well, he had a few ideas. One in particular sounded a little risky, but it convinced him more and more as he thought about it. Maybe he was being affected by the world's strange logic that seemed to rule things from time to time. Or maybe he was just strange himself. Or both, Kij pointed out, which was fair. From there, the situation sort of snowballed. The more they could reduce the area they had to search, the easier it was to come across more clues. Soon enough, they were finding each other pretty often through the village. And at that point, Senjutsu of the spiders has gone up a level. His Senjutsu was starting to cover a good piece of land that they had to search. From there, it was him that started picking up clues. Or, at least, he could hear a lot of stuff, and with his clones helping filter even more, it got easier and easier the more they reduced the searching zone. It still took his espionage specialists to decipher some of the things they picked up, but IG was fine with that. He had his strengths and his weaknesses. And besides, he was learning while he was at it. Maybe, eventually, he'd be an all-rounder. If not, then, well, that's why he'd formed a team in the first place. His suicide squad would cover his back, most of them, at least. He was still kind of on the fence with Sasori, for very obvious reasons. Maybe he'd get there. Unlikely, Kij all but scoffed. Not happening, Hakai agreed. If he was honest, IG would admit that they were right. There was no way he'd ever trust Sasori. The Sound Ninja had the advantage of being young and more able to change. They'd also been picked up by Orochimaru, who was a bit of a manipulative bastard. Even Kabuto, who was the more sketchy one, had changed quite a bit, and they'd all seen it happen. Which showed that they hadn't been given much of a chance to begin with, something that IG already knew. Sasori, though, he'd turned like he did all by himself. There was also the fact that showing any kind of favor for Sasori would antagonize Suna. They were in a position where that wasn't much of a problem at the moment, but still, there was no need to push their luck on that. Thus, the puppet master would remain a prisoner that could fight on his side if he wanted, and only that. No chances for redemption like the rest of the squad. It was that or dying, at least, and IG had a feeling he knew what the answer of the man would be. That also meant he could backstab them at any time though, which made the situation a little complicated. How I wish I didn't need him, he grumbled to himself. Alas, Sasori was a great asset and he was reasonably under control. After all, who in their right mind doesn't fear death? Or, more specifically in this case, the Void, IG supposed. He was enough of a threat to keep the puppet master in place, hopefully. I think you are underestimating how much of a danger you are to anyone, IG Hakai pointed out, although he wasn't sure how right she was. IG, you are a pseudo-Jinchuriki with Senjutsu. Kij added bluntly, sounding completely unimpressed. When you put it like that. IG mumbled in his mind. Idiot, the twins said in unison, like the twins they were. Stop calling us that. they said again, completely ruining their own argument. Exasperated, Hakai huffed while Kij bristled. IG for his part, decided to end the conversation in the best way he could possibly think of. Go, Sachi, he said, then tuning out the consequent cries for help. Oh. So, what's the plan, fearless leader? Taeya asked, for once not playing her flute as she laid lazily over a tree branch, arm and leg falling off to the side. The rest of the team gathered next to said tree as they prepared to discuss the next course of action. It had been a good few weeks and IG thought it necessary to pull out and go through the plan once more now that they had more information. Also to relax for a bit, because while the espionage experts might be fine, the rest probably weren't, just like him. If the way his non-spy members were acting was any indication, he'd been right. Taeya's example was the most noticeable on that front. Tamrai, for her part, seemed to not even be paying attention to the game of shogi she'd started with Yujito. Jirobo was doing his best Chaoji impression and scarfing down food like his life depended on it while he sat against a tree. IG himself thought he needed at least a moment to pull himself together, honestly. Even with Hakai and Kij to share the load with him if they needed to and Sachi offering moral support, he still felt like the infiltration had drained the energy right out of him. Fearless leader. Taeya called again, snapping IG from his thoughts. Right, he said, and even to himself, he sounded tired. Thank God for his mind companions. Without them, he'd be worried that his weariness had affected his plan making. With them to confirm that it was solid, he pushed forward. We are almost there on the Fu front. So, we take a break while my clones just hold the fort and then we charge back in to finish this thing. I'm already fucking tired of this shit show. Careful, you are sounding like Taeya there, IG Tamrai pointed out with a weak smile. He just sighed. No offense, guys, but espionage sucks, he said instead of replying to the Suna Kunoichi. It's not for everyone, Yujito said simply, shrugging to herself as she contemplated Tamrai's move on their game. Sasori just gave him one of his flat, puppet looks. Kabuto, interestingly, didn't comment either. Anyway, we can stay here for a day, maybe two. After that, we gotta go back. The clones can't hold up for that long, and the longer we stay away, the less convincing their act will be, I'm sure. I'm good, but I'm not that good, IG explained, getting nods and some relieved sighs from his team. Kabuto, he called then, making the silver-haired boy turn towards him. Yes. As I said, we are almost done gathering information about Taki's Jinchuriki. I want you to try and get more information about Taki itself while we set to finish the main mission. Do you think you can? IG asked. It wasn't part of the mission, he'd admit, but it was a perfect moment to do that. A minor village, it might be, but it could still have some useful things. Most importantly, intel on previous Jinchuriki should be a priority, but anything that seems remotely useful will be fine. I can do that, Kabuto agreed easily with a nod, and IG could almost see the plans forming on his face. He was the only one that IG felt remotely comfortable sending on a side mission like that, which was something. He wouldn't let Sasori out of his sight unless he really needed to. No need to give the puppet master more chances to backstab him than he'd already get. As for Yujito, she was still a Kumo ninja first and a member second, and IG had no delusions on what that meant in a situation like this one. No, Kabuto was the best and only option. If past me could hear me now, he thought with a mental grin. You'd think yourself absolutely mad, Hakai commented, sounding just as amused. I mean, you are, Kij pointed out. Oh. God fucking damn it. Taeya all but shouted. How'd you come up with a game that's worse than you know? She asked him, incredulous. Taeya, you are one of the unluckiest game players I've ever seen, IG told her with a grin. And can I just say? It's hilarious. I hate you, all of you. 3 against 1, from land of bears to land of mountains, Sasori said, interrupting the conversation. Interestingly and shockingly enough, the puppet master had taken to the little strategy game he'd introduced for this break quite well. Fuck you, Jito cursed, picking up one die while looking apprehensively at the 3 dice in Sasori's hand. Yeah, IG understood, the guy had made a hole in her defenses there. Good thing was, IG himself would attack him from another front. It wouldn't save you, Jito, but... well, you win some, you lose some. Her sacrifice would be remembered. Oh. This is a bad idea, Taeya whispered in his ear as he walked, but he just continued walking. He'd made up his mind, and that was all there was to it. There was really no easy way to do this. All plans had a chance of failure, especially in this case, and there was just no way to guarantee even a good failure. So, he'd go with this. Senjutsu told him everyone's position. Yujito, the farthest of the bunch, since she'd be the one to most likely give them away, if that came to pass. Tamrai, not that much closer, ready to take flight on her fan if she needed to get anywhere. Gyrobo and Kabuto to one side, prepared to either jump in and do some damage control or keep people out of the way if it came to that. Sasori to the other with much the same objective. Yuki, meanwhile, walked dutifully next to him. It was, maybe, a risk, but the dog would have none of his plans to keep her away and he'd allow her that much. A really bad idea, Taeya repeated from where she was, the closest to him on Kabuto and Gyrobo's side, in case they needed to protect her too. To be fair, nobody was a fan of the plan, not even IG himself. However, as sad as that was, it was the best they had, in his opinion. Some of the others disagreed, but he disagreed just as much with their options. Really, there was just no easy way to do this. He might as well do things his way if that was the case. Fearless leader, I swear, if this goes badly, the genjutsu expert continued grumbling. IG had half a mind to just dissipate her technique on him, but that wasn't a good idea. Not for the mission, at least, because God did it sound like one to him at that moment. Eventually, he reached the clearing and walked in. Hello, he greeted simply, making the other person there all but jump as they turned to him. Fu, the 7 tails container, he said as he looked her up and down. She looked just like his notes said she would, although there was supposed to be a spark there that wasn't present at the moment. He'd noted her as possibly energetic. The girl looked all but dead to the world. It's nice to meet you. She didn't reply for a long moment, although IG could see the way her eyes locked on the Konoha symbol on his arm. He'd left it there on purpose, after all. Contrary to what he expected, she didn't immediately charge at him or start shouting or anything. Instead, she just looked at him and then spoke, calmly. Things were already looking pretty good, it seemed. There was no need to use Taeya's plan just yet. Why are you here, Weaver? She asked. He was almost surprised that she knew of him, but then again, they were training her to the best of their abilities. She probably knew of most ninja that had made a name for themselves. I'm here to offer you a chance to get away from here. To Konoha, she finished before he could continue, understanding instantly. And why should I even consider that? She asked this time. IG noted that she sounded resigned, might be a word for it. To what? He didn't have the slightest idea, but that's what it was. Because it'll be better than what's going on here, he answered, looking around the clearing, but meaning Takigakyo. It won't be all good, I admit. Our own Jinchuriki isn't too happy with the place. But at least he gets freedom to train as much as he wants to without being run into the ground. He gets to have a life, even if it's a little harder than normal due to his condition, he told her. There were many approaches to this. He could have lied through his teeth to manipulate her, but that had the possibility of being too obvious or causing trouble once his lies caught up to him. He could just say to hell with it and pull an Akatsuki, kidnapping her and dealing with that later. He didn't like those approaches though. That's all you have to say? Fu said, seemingly almost surprised. You aren't a stupid person, I don't think. I don't approach those types, honestly. I prefer people that don't need a whole speech to know what's going on. I think you can fill the holes well enough on your own, can't you? He reasoned, and he noticed somewhat of a trend there. Didn't I say something similar to Sasori? You did, I confirmed. And if I refuse? She wouldn't, Iji knew that. She had no ties inside this village whatsoever. There was nothing keeping her in the village at all. No Ishiraku, or Jiji, or anything like Naruto had had. Only things she had were superiors, constantly pressuring her to be better and disappointed in her, and civilians that avoided her on the previously mentioned superiors' orders. He couldn't see how she wouldn't take a chance for a better place. Do you know about Akatsuki? He asked instead of answering, immediately making the girl stiffen and narrow her eyes at him. I'm here to stop them from getting to you. I'll remain here for that mission, and if we take them out, I'll go. You can think over the offer in the meantime. Although, I urge you to keep it to yourself. I'm guessing someone will be around to know if I want to talk to you. Considering our mission is literally to protect you, yes, I think there will be, he replied with an amused half smile. Her cheeks turned the slightest pink in embarrassment at not having realized that. That's all I had to say. I hope you make the right choice, Fu. You could do better than this. And with his piece said, he turned to leave. Teiya could only keep him hidden with her genjutsu for so long, after all. With any luck, Fu, at the very least, wouldn't run to tell her superiors about them. That'd turn the situation messy. Although, to be fair, there was no subtle way to steal a Jinchuriki, so that was a guaranteed thing anyway. Wait, Fu called then, although she was already standing next to him. You are not lying, are you? I'm not, he answered simply, although he couldn't see how she would know if he was lying or not. He was pretty sure her Jinchuriki powers didn't involve anything like that. I'll go with you. No way, Teiya whispered in his ear, disbelieving, and he had to suppress a smug grin. No fucking way it was that easy. So, I know this is a bit unexpected. A bit. More than one person in the team asked, interrupting Iji, who simply grinned wryly at them. He couldn't really fault them, really. He himself hadn't foreseen things going as they had. I'm just that awesome, guys. Deal with it, he said, getting more than a few eyes rolled at him. Then, he turned his attention to the squirming green-haired girl next to him. She was the picture of awkwardness, but he guessed that made sense, considering the situation. You'll get used to these people, I'm sure. I look forward to it. Fu said hesitantly. Let me introduce you to everyone, Iji told her, deciding to just get the ball rolling and see where things went. Fu wasn't supposed to be an addition to the team, so there would be no problem if they didn't get along or something. He knew his little band of misfits would at least be professional. At least enough to not make her regret her decision, hopefully. First, that's Taeya, he started, making the redhead all but preen at his words. She has the foulest mouth around and she's a bit of a brat, but she's good deep down, really deep down. Try and not murder her if you can manage. I won't hold it against you if you don't though. Gee, I feel the love, fearless leader, the girl in question deflated, giving him a glare. She also gives nicknames to everyone, so don't take offense when she does the same to you. Next we have Tamrai, he continued, signaling the blonde who gave the Seven Tails Jinchuriki a little wave in greeting. She's my second in command, if I'm not around, you listen to her. Nice to meet you, the blonde nodded to the temporary new addition to their group. Then we have Jirobo, he's a little quiet and a not so little intimidating, but he's good, he explained, moving on to the boys for a little bit. Kabuto Yakushi, resident medic and spy. He looks like a nice guy, but don't let that deceive you. Are you trying to make her feel safe or scare her, IG? The aforementioned grey-haired boy asked, raising an unimpressed eyebrow at him. A bit of both, IG replied with a grin. This is Sasori. Never be alone in his presence. I'm serious. He was part of Akatsuki and I got him working with us, but don't trust anything he does or says. At that, Fu awkwardly shuffled a little further from the aforementioned man. That was good, as far as IG was concerned. The fact that the puppet master didn't say anything didn't discourage her at all, that was for sure. And this is Yuji Tonii, the Two Tails Jinchuriki, he introduced last, making the girl perk up, eyes wide as she looked at the older blonde and the rest of the group. She's somewhat nice, I think. I think you could have sounded more doubtful if you tried, IG, the blonde commented, raising an eyebrow at him while he grinned unrepentantly. And this is Yuki, the best of the bunch, as simple as that, he introduced them, placing a hand over the Ninken's head. The dog, for her part, barked happily at the girl. Truly, she was the friendliest, so she was also his hope to make the girl feel somewhat welcome. And that's everyone, I think. Welcome to the Suicide Squad. Hopefully you won't be too scared of us by the time we reach Konoha, IG finished. Suicide Squad. That's the part she focuses on. Yujito mumbled in disbelief while Taeya barked out a laugh. Because we really have no business surviving the shit we are sent to do, IG replied with a wry smile. Also, Taeya won't let the name go, so it's what it is. I see. The girl said hesitantly. Don't worry too much. I know they are a weird bunch. Hopefully, you won't fit in too well. I gotta have someone normal around, IG said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Ruthrit, who wants to burst his bubble? Taeya asked, looking around the group. IG, no offense, but you might be the weirdest of us all. Yujito deadpanned at him and he recoiled, placing a hand over his chest. I'll have you know I'm perfectly normal, he protested, although even he himself had to chuckle at that while some of the others accompanied him, or outright laughed like Taeya. So, hopefully I haven't scared you off already, he commented, turning towards Fu, who was looking around slightly wide-eyed. He could have definitely handled introductions and such much better, he knew that. However, he liked being honest and Fu had already taken the leap of faith with them. Really, it should take much more than this to make her regret her decision. There was also another little thing that IG had wanted to make clear in a slightly more subtle way and he hoped he'd managed to make it come across. Fu looked a little overwhelmed though, which didn't help him determine how successful he'd been in his side objective. No, it's fine, the girl replied hesitantly, which didn't help much. It's fine, she repeated, looking around, taking the group in. Tamrai, if you could take it from here, I have to go over some things with Kabuto. After that, we are moving away from here, everyone. I hope you are all ready to go. I wanna get away from here before shit hits the fan, he said, getting several affirmative responses from everyone as they started moving, finishing whatever they needed to before they had to move away. Some, already prepared to leave, simply sat down to do their own thing, like Sasori, who immediately pulled one of his few puppets to tinker, and Teiya, who started playing her flute. So, did you find anything interesting? Ig asked as he pulled Kabuto aside. A few things, the silver-haired boy started. Oh. Phew. She was pretty sure she was dreaming or something. There was just no way this was real, after all. What were the chances that, when she needed it the most, someone would come to save her? When everyone shunned her, when the other ninja kept on asking more from her, when she was growing more and more tired every day, when the only thing driving her was Chomiya. This person, Ig Sata, the weaver, appeared just like that, offering her the way out that she'd been hoping for. Fu knew she'd been desperate, but surely this couldn't be an illusion or something, right? Certainly not a genjutsu, Chomiya whispered excitedly. This is all really happening. Fu also knew she'd been desperate, but surely she hadn't just fallen for a trap, right? That I'm less sure about, but they've been truthful so far from what I can tell, her somewhat childish partner hesitated. Wait, give me a sec, the Seven Tails added before going silent, much to Fu's confusion. Now I wonder if this is a trap, she thought to herself as she looked around. Everyone seemed to be doing their own thing, mostly. Some were checking their equipment, others just sat down to wait. That's when Fu's eyes found the one Weaver had said was Yujitoni. She knew her, she'd seen her photo during her training, and still, she couldn't help but doubt if it was truly her. Another Jinchuriki, right in front of her. That wasn't the most surprising thing though. Fu had heard of the Weaver's team too. Everyone knew that something had gone on in Iowa and that the Weaver had been there with a team. The Rock had done its absolute best to cover up as much information about the whole thing as they could. Also, the intel that Fu had been given said, at least. Now she knew that they'd been at least mostly correct. Maybe she'd get to know the whole story now that she was apparently traveling with them. Do you know about Akatsuki? I'm here to stop them from getting to you. Had they been in Iowa for a similar reason? It was a possibility, Fu supposed. However, why would a Konoha be in Iowa to help? That was a little harder to fit into her theory, but that was the only theory she had at the moment. It also explains him too, Fu thought as she nervously eyed Sasori of the Red Sand. I wouldn't be too worried, someone said, making her jump a little. Forgot I was here. Tamrai, Fu was pretty sure she'd read about her being the sister of the currently appointed Kazekage, daughter of the previous one. A little overwhelmed, are you? The blonde asked with an amused expression. Fu could only smile nervously at her. She was kind of zoning out a lot, she supposed. You said I shouldn't be worried? She asked, trying to not let her mind wander off again. She was kind of surrounded by possibly hostile people. Possibly hostile people that she'd willingly gone with because it might be a better choice than staying where she was. God, her situation sucked. About Sasori, Tamrai answered, wearing a grimace of a smile. He makes me nervous too, but IG has him under control. That was a lot more capable than the Weaver was supposed to be according to Taki's intelligence. Then again, even Taki itself knew they weren't the best around, so all information came with a warning that it might be inaccurate. Regardless, the Weaver wasn't supposed to be the S rank that would be needed to at least stand up to Sasori, let alone have him under control. I know, Tamrai continued, apparently reading her expression quite well. Then again, Fu had never been too good at acting, much to her superior's disappointment. Well, that was one way to ruin her mood. Iji's entirely too strong, honestly. You'll see when we get some distance and we can start training. If you are lucky, you might even get away with not joining. Don't say that, Yujitoni, I said then, giving a wry smile to the other blonde. We need some help to try and win, you know. I wouldn't say no to another Jinchuriki. I don't know how much help I would be, Fu commented, feeling more than a little lost in that conversation. She did note something though, Tamrai hadn't reacted in any overtly way to the other Jinchuriki. Do these people not care about that? Fu had to wonder. Although, the sand ninja might be used to such presences, what with her brother being the one-tail container? Well, it'd depend, how in tune are you with your tailed beast? Yujito asked and Fu perked up. Don't answer that, another voice said, although Fu couldn't tell where it came from. It sounded like the redhead that was playing the flute, but she couldn't be the one talking. It's her, with a genjutsu, Chomiya informed her, making Fu blink. Well, that was one way to use illusions, she supposed. Also, Ig told you not to ask about that, but you just couldn't help yourself, could you, bimbo number 2? The redhead, Teiya, continued. Ig's gonna have an opinion about that. The commiserating look Tamrai sent Yujito said plenty, but so did the paling of the Jinchuriki's face. How strong is the Weaver really? Fu had to wonder, slightly wide-eyed. She still all but got the answer to her question. Another new voice, Chirobo this time, pointed out. I didn't even, Fu started, before being interrupted. Your face couldn't be easier to read if you tried, dumbass, Teiya told her, rolling her eyes as she continued playing. I think I'll call you dumb, Fu. All of a sudden, Fu knew why the girl's introduction had been like it was. She could only feel bad for the rest of the team, if they had had to put up with her for a while already. She could tell it was going to be a chore to just not smack her. Oh. Ig Sata. Man, I almost feel bad, Ig commented, sitting on a tree branch over where his team was currently training. Fu was currently sitting next to him, since she wasn't actually part of the team and hadn't looked too eager to join in. Taki hasn't even come close to finding us. It feels like I'm bullying Chunin or something. No offense. I don't really care, Fu replied hesitantly. She'd been kind of skittish ever since she joined, which Ig was grateful for, really. It told him that she wasn't doing so just like that. She had doubts and was trying to find answers. To be honest, he'd be a lot more suspicious about how things had gone if not for that. If you say so, he said simply, keeping an eye on everything through his web sense. He also had 2 clones practicing senjutsu. Furthermore, Ig's eyes moved to the side, where a group of clones were gathered around scrolls, books and notes. He'd started working on it after stopping in Konoha and talking with a few people. Getting the information had been easy, but then again, the higher-ups back home wouldn't say no to him for much. Chomiya says you feel weird, Fu said out of the blue, making him blink and turn towards her. They say you feel like a Jinchuriki. Ig felt Tsuchigumo perk up in his mindscape, instantly paying attention to what was going on. He'd actually been wondering about that. Could Baiju feel each other? Guess that answers that question, IG mused. Brings up some others though, like why haven't Naruto or Yujito mentioned it? Is it just a Seven Tails thing? Was there a question somewhere in there? He asked, tilting his head and giving her a half smile. She hadn't actually asked anything. She'd just pointed out what her Baiju had said, really. Oh, I was just curious as to why. Fu added, not sounding very sure about that. Hamaiji thought, considering what to say. Obviously, talking about Sachigumo was out of the question. When said beast projected confusion, he decided to address that first. Because people are already hunting chakra beasts, girl. I don't want people to come after us too. Once we deal with Akatsuki, we can start telling people about you. Sound about right? He felt her sit and consider that. Then she barked, and he instantly got the meaning through the mindscape. She agreed with that, but only because he was nice and the twins agreed. Also, she seemed especially intent on meeting Naruto and the rest of the group when the time came. Even more so than the other tailed beasts, which was interesting. Remember what I said about Konoha's Jinchuriki? IG said out loud then, when Fu looked to be getting more and more nervous. She nodded instantly, before seemingly processing his words and tilting her head. He's been my best friend for years now. That certainly didn't seem to be something she expected. Once we reach Konoha, I'll introduce you to Naruto. He can be a handful, but I think you'll get along, IG told her, omitting the fact that Naruto could get along with most people, really. We are practically brothers, as far as we are concerned. That, really. Aren't you afraid? The Nine Tails incident was. It cost me my parents, IG told her plainly. But Naruto didn't have anything to do with that. Also, he was going to add how he'd understand if a trapped prisoner raged once it was broken out, but that felt like a little much to him. Anyway, I don't hold that against him. You really don't, do you? Fu asked, narrowing her eyes at him. You keep asking questions like that, but I don't know what I could do to convince you that I'm not lying, IG replied with a helpless shrug. You are slacking, Jirobo, and I can see it. He called then, turning to the training team for a second before turning back to Fu. Anyway, yeah, I mean that. Is that why though? Fu, perceptive as she was, questioned. I think. This is the first time I hear about this, so I wouldn't know. There's Yujito too, now. I also had to fight against Gaara and Killer Bee, he listed. Wow, I have lots of excuses for this, huh? Good thing too, Hakai pointed out. I guess that could be it, Fu mumbled. Can I ask, why did you offer to take me out of there? Because having another Jinchuriki would be great for my village, IG answered bluntly. He could lie, of course, but she had to know that was the reason. Anything else would be stupid and unreasonable, and she didn't strike him as that kind. I see. Nothing else. Well, the fact that your situation was terrible was a big plus, I'll say, IG easily admitted. I'd hate to see Naruto in that situation, so I wanted to get you out. Do you know what it'll be like once we reach Konoha? Well, my guess is that they'll have people keep an eye on you for a good while, to make sure you didn't just come to spy or backstab us, IG mused out loud. I wasn't really told. My mission was to protect you and get you to come with us if I could manage. With that done, I don't have any orders regarding this, really, besides getting you to Konoha safely. I see, Fu whispered. Do you think I could join the training sometimes? She asked then, looking down at the team that was still sparring against one another. Sure thing, we could always use someone strong added to the training. IG agreed easily with a smile as he regarded the team. Adding some variety can only help, otherwise we get used to one another, he added. Okay then, I just might, Fu mumbled, although IG could see some life appear behind her eyes and a smile forming on her lips. Thanks. Don't know what you are thanking me for, but you are welcome, he replied. Oh. Dumb Fu was the right nickname, it seems, Taeya commented, not even bothering to try to get out of the wires that were holding her against a tree. To be fair, some members of the team had given up on that front, partially at least. Most of them instantly started looking for a way out that was not just struggling against the threads. Instead, they started looking for the alternative way that IG usually left for them. Sometimes it was a specific wire that was wrapped around a particularly weak branch. Sometimes if two of them pulled in a certain direction it'd work better than just doing so randomly. Sometimes he'd give them questions that they had to answer. Sometimes he made one of them come up with the challenge. How was I supposed to know that you have a monster for a leader? Fu whined in a way that reminded IG strikingly of Naruto. Seriously, how did you get so strong? He's leading around an ex-Akatsuki member and a Jinchuriki that's much stronger than you. What did you expect, dumb Fu? That was a valid question. Did Fu think he was in charge just because of politics or something? Either way, he'd shown her exactly why during the first and only training session she'd joined. She'd also said she'd do some more, but so far she'd rejected every offer. Girl has a good sense of self-preservation, Kij commented with a chuckle. He was in a good mood. He'd gotten to do the first half of the spar before giving control to Hakai, who had taken care of tying the team up in wires. That's fair, Fu reluctantly agreed. Aren't you gonna join anytime soon? It's always nice to have someone else, Jirobo asked with a grimace. Try moving your left leg, Yujito Kabuto called, eyes narrowed as he tried to decipher that day's way out with the two tails Jinchuriki and Tamrai. That wasn't right, he added, grimacing as the action he suggested tightened a wire around his arm. If only to make it a little easier on us, Jirobo finished, grimacing from where he stood, completely tied up by wires and left on the ground. Everyone had thought that was taking him out of the equation, which was funny. IG had actually tied a thread around his toe that would cause a chain reaction and free Tamrai if pulled just a bit. It looked like it'd take them a while to find that one though. Yeah. I think I might join the next one. It takes some getting used to, Fu commented with an uneasy smile. You don't get used to it, dumb Fu. Trust us, we know, Taeya grumbled. Oh. You have good defense, I'll admit, but you gotta work on your offense. Otherwise, you'll be depending on your teammates a little too much, IG said as they traveled. Fu had taken to keeping him close, for some reason. It might be due to some of his warnings about team members though, he supposed. Jirobo was still pretty cool though, and there was Yuki too, but they didn't seem to get more attention or anything. He'd have asked her, but he thought that might just make her uncomfortable. She probably had her reasons, he supposed. Regardless, she'd also started joining the training exercises more and more as the days passed. From there, it had devolved into her wanting advice and suggestions and such. IG was all for it though, he quite liked training with the group and the team. Although, he seemed to enjoy training in general. Aren't you and all of Konoha, like, teamwork's biggest fans, fearless leader? Taeya asked then. I'm all for working together with others, yes. But if you over-specialize, you can easily become a burden to your team. A weak link, depending on the situation. So, at the least, one should be able to defend and attack. Besides that, do whatever you want, IG replied with a shrug. That's just me though, lots of ninja don't go for either of those. As a Jinchuriki, I think you'll need to cover your fighting well. He's not wrong, Yujito agreed. I specialize in infiltration, sabotage and espionage, but I was still trained to fight. I see. Fu mumbled. Any ideas? Well, you have a bunch of insect-oriented techniques and seem to go in a more supportive direction with all of them. I think threads. No. Several team members screamed. That'd be a little like I was stealing your style, I think, Fu muttered nervously. Thank God, I won't ever call you dumb Fu ever again, Skitter Taeyar exclaimed. Skitter? Fu whispered to herself. Anyway, I think maybe. She was interrupted when a blade flew by, aimed at IG. Tilting his head to the side in reflex, he felt the thing scratch his cheek before flying away. The entire group then stopped, before Jirobo instantly punched to his side. The sound of wood breaking echoing in the forest. So, he did turn traitor, the freaky bastard, Taeyar snarled, looking at the remains of Sasori's puppet. Sure did. He had some loyalty in him, unlike a whore like you, ha 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 ha. A voice called then, laughing in a way that IG could see unnerved Fu quite a bit. The rest of his team simply stood on guard, turning towards the people that had body flickered in. And now, for our next trick, we take out upstart douche. Meanwhile we can play a bit, a new voice said, appearing right in front of the team. I'm sure someone will pay pretty well for your heads. Kakuzu and Haiden Tamrai said. You know it. Haiden shouted from somewhere behind the trees. Shouldn't you be more focused on your, what was it? Fearless leader. You know what to do, IG said when his team turned towards him because of Hayden's words. All of you though. IG Tamrai started protesting. All of you, he repeated, his lips slowly forming a smile. I want to let loose. There was silence then as he took a step and then another towards his opponent. The team, meanwhile, dashed into the woods. Kakuzu looked at their retreating shapes before giving him what he imagined was a raised eyebrow. That wasn't very smart, the S-rank missing nin commented. I'm not complaining though. People are bound to pay quite a bit for the Weaver's head. Especially Taki, after they learn of what happened. I'm sure IG nodded, regarding his opponent the same way they were him. Instantly, a clone was made that vanished just as fast. He couldn't see much of Kakuzu's expression, but he was fairly sure that he looked amused by the action. Regardless, he hadn't interfered, and that was good enough for IG. So he started then, wires coming to life around him as his right hand gripped new ivory. More and more threads appeared in puffs of smoke from storage seals. Do we get started already? Kakuzu, for his part, did much the same as he did. Pitch black strings seemed to come out of his body. They spread behind him like ominous hair, waving around as if given life by the very wind. We could, if only you weren't dead already, Kakuzu mused, at the same time that IG felt a stab pierce his heart. Sachigumo growled inside him as he activated World Ender and she powered it herself. IG could feel it though, the way his little, adorable beast wanted to do more, to give him the power to destroy this foe, to pursue the other, to hunt the traitor. Not yet, girl, he whispered to her, calmly. Soon, but not yet. "I'm not that easy to kill," he said with a smile that grew wider at the same time as Kakuzu's eyes did. Then, instantly, he flickered to the side, and then again to behind him. The third one put him still behind the Akatsuki member, but slightly to the side. Channeling lightning through his legendary weapon, he threw it at Kakuzu. The bounty hunter tried to stop it with his own threads, but that was a lost cause if IG had ever seen one. New Ivory might be no same harder, but it was a legendary sword all the same, and he was not weak by any measure. It would take more effort than that to prevent the weapon from piercing through its target. In the end, Kakuzu was forced to dodge to the side. That part wasn't that difficult. However, that bought IG the split second he needed to run through a few hand seals. Sunfire Cape activated around him, boosting him even more. He'd have gone for Senjutsu, but that'd take a little too much time to use in the middle of a fight such as that one. With the technique active, he pulled his arm back, recalling the sword back to him. He almost messed the action up, when his other arm suddenly gained a cut that hadn't been there before. How has the team not taken Hayden out yet? He had to wonder. His grin remained as he flickered once more, lighting at his feet and fire around him. The place where he'd been standing decimated by dark threads, just like he'd known would happen. The failure didn't deter Kakuzu in the slightest though, the rest of his strings moving as if nothing had happened, some waving menacingly around while others rushed towards him. He simply dodged this time, half the attacking threads missing because of the movement while the other half was stopped by his wires. Many powered through, but were sufficiently disturbed by the obstacle set that they didn't hit, at least. IG knew fighting that way would end in his defeat though. Fortunately, he had a lot more than just threads. Immediately, the sacred flock came to life, spreading their cackling wings and rushing towards his opponent. Kakuzu wasn't fazed by that either, it seemed, immediately blocking and hitting most of them with his threads. Earth is supposed to be weak against lightning, what the fuck? IG protested in his mind. All his info said that Kakuzu's technique was Earth release. Had that been wrong, or was this just another Naruto bullshit logic moment? That was fine though, he could throw lightning birds forever thanks to Sachi, so they'd be a distraction and a dangerous worry to have around. That worked well enough for IG. It was slightly surreal though, when he thought about it, that he was in a level that S-ranked jutsu were merely inconveniences and distractions. It was what it was though. More of the hair-like threads were coming his way, even as his birds assaulted where Kakuzu was standing. Flickering several times, away from the enemy strings, IG considered what to do. This was a tricky opponent, he knew. He had several plans to deal with him, especially once he started pulling his masks out. The thing was, most of those plans involved him revealing cards he'd rather not. With as much information as he had, not using powers he wanted to be kept secret reduced his options dramatically. Senjutsu was something he suspected they knew though. An almost instant hand seal had one of his wires whiplash towards Kakuzu, who seemed slightly taken aback by the extra power that this specific thread seemed to carry. That was the opening IG needed. Several more of the same technique started rushing at the man after that split-second opening. Meanwhile, some of his wires moved on the ground, hidden in the loose earth in a way that would make Hakai proud. The woman huffed in his mind, but IG knew he was right. Regardless, he didn't pay that much attention, still busy dodging the pitch-black tendrils that still waved through the air trying to get a hold of him. Furthermore, he still had to take into account the wounds he received from Hayden. There hadn't been another wound from that, but IG didn't want to be caught off guard in case something happened. With any luck, his team might have already taken care of that particular problem. New Ivory slashed at a few of the threads that were coming his way, and IG made sure to pay attention to the cut bits. He didn't know if Kakuzu could control detached parts, but just in case he'd keep an eye on that. From the looks of it though, he couldn't. That could be useful if he confirmed it. For the moment though, he didn't want to cut too much and find out that he could control that. Better to be on the safe side and continue dodging and blocking. All the while, he also tried to prevent a grimace from forming because he knew one thing for certain about the situation. This is going nowhere, IG said in his mind, agreeing with his thoughts without knowing, for once. He also was certain he had to do something before Kakuzu grew bored with the stale situation and upped his game. Things weren't looking all that well, it seemed. No, he needed to do something to change the situation or things would start going badly. Use the boosts hack, I told him. It's either that or Tsuchigumo, she added, and he had to concede the point. With a grimace as he continued dodging, he prepared himself. Running, free running, intermediate taijutsu, intermediate kenjutsu, bloodlust he activated then, instantly bringing up the hidden wires from the ground. Flickering through the threads, web sense helped him find the easiest way through the swaying threads. He needed to use his one chance well. That's why IG dashed until he was in the right position over Kakuzu and stabbed New Ivory down in a very specific angle, diagonally through the man's back. Not only piercing his actual heart, but also the wind and water ones, if he had remembered the colors on the masks right while taking his notes of folk knowledge. With those out, fighting Kakuzu without him holding back would be easy. He wouldn't have wind to counter his lightning or water to counter his fire. IG's repertoire allowed him to counter those elements if they were used the other way around, but he didn't like his odds in that scenario. Kakuzu had a lot more experience than he did, after all. So, he made sure that part was out, using lightning and fire chakra flow through New Ivory, together with stunning thread. He also did it way overpowered, just to be on the safe side as much as he could. IG knew Kakuzu could stitch himself back together, but if the things were completely useless due to burning, well, that should at least make things difficult, right? He hoped he was right. What in the... The Akatsuki member coughed out, swirling his threads in a way resembling the Hyuga's defense technique. How did you even do that? He asked through his teeth. That wasn't a jutsu, he muttered through his teeth. Wouldn't you like to know? IG asked back with a grin. I'll beat you and then I'll get the answer, Kakuzu growled. Right before I get the money for your head. I'll make sure to deliver you alive though, so whoever hates you the most can have their fun. Morbidly, IG wondered who that person would be. Taki, maybe. It could pay to find that out, just in case. That was a worry for the future though. The greatest threat at the moment was the one he was fighting against. I won't underestimate you anymore, Kakuzu said, as if it were a threat. If it makes you feel better, IG said, mostly to buy time. He just needed a bit more. That happens a lot. So don't feel too bad when you end up doing it again. That won't happen, Kakuzu hissed. So you say? Just wait till the Akatsuki member started, only to be interrupted by New Ivory being sent flying through the air at him. He dodged it though, right before it could pierce another one of his hearts. Although, dodging might be the wrong word for it. It was actually more like, his body separated around the sword. His arm and shoulder tearing apart from the rest of his body with only a few threads connecting them. They took the mask IG had been aiming for with them too, before completely detaching from the main body. IG flickered back then as the mask that had separated shot a small fireball his way. He didn't remember anything about that, but he knew Kakuzu wouldn't send something weak his way. Especially then and there, which was why he flickered again. Sure enough, upon hitting a tree, fire exploded everywhere, singing him even with the distance he'd put in between. World Ender took care of that though. Once the fire subsided, IG summoned as many clones as he could, all of which dashed all around in an instant. The original IG charged straight at Kakuzu's main body, now only holding the lightning heart. Evidently, he didn't need his own main heart to use Earth release though, which was a bummer. He'd half hoped that taking out that one would stop him from using his main technique. That was more wishful thinking than anything though, and he'd known that. IG's clones, for their part, divided themselves between Kakuzu and his mask. Some stayed at a distance, using shuriken jutsu and ninjutsu to hit from afar. Others ran right up to them, a few taken out by the threads in their reckless charge, others dodging and blocking. The original, for his part. Tsunade style. Hakai asked in his mind as he pushed through the threads with just the sheer amount of buffs that he had on himself at the moment. It was easy, way too easy to reach Kakuzu. Or, at least, it was for him. He rather doubted other people would think the same. Threads pierced through IG when his opponent noticed that he couldn't stop him. It didn't matter. World Ender would take care of the wounds and he could still power through that too. He just needed to end this fight and end it before his energy points ran out and he lost a chunk of his buffs. Thus, even with Kakuzu trying to get away and dodge, IG's fist collided with the man's chest. He did his absolute best to aim for where the remaining heart was. Maybe he wouldn't kill someone like Kakuzu with just that, but he could damn try and hope that he at least affected him. The numerous threads that dug into him instantly told him of the foolishness of that, but he didn't stop. His clones were still barraging the Akatsuki member and now IG himself with attacks, and they didn't stop. The boy himself pushed through the attempted restraints and punched again, and again. Sachigumo, in the back of his mind, pushed against the strings as she powered World Ender. "You won't kill me like that, boy." Kakuzu growled and IG felt the shift instantly. There was a split second to realize what was going to happen, as a slight crackle of lightning that didn't come from him reached his ears. Then electricity exploded from Kakuzu's mouth. Their surroundings were bathed in light as the beam made of lightning pierced through the location, destroying anything in its path all the way towards where sight couldn't even reach anymore. It lasted a few seconds at most, and then there was only silence all around. "Is that all?" IG asked, blood trickling its way down from his lips and nose. Kakuzu's eyes widened. "What? You thought you two were the only immortal ones around?" the boy said, a smirk forming on his lips as his opponent regarded him with disbelief. The middle of his torso, now showing a hole the size of a head on his right side that went straight through him from front to back, slowly closing as his body tried to regenerate. It'd be a struggle though, since IG didn't have the mass to regenerate all that. He'd need to eat something and soon to give his body something more to work with. Even World Ender couldn't make that just disappear in an instant thought. What's more, Sachigumo was giving the technique as much chakra as she possibly could, desperate to have him recover quickly. Meanwhile, his chakra coils burned with the excessive amount of energy now constantly flowing through them. Around his vision, a considerable number of screens appeared. New skill acquired, lightning resistance. Lightning resistance has gone up a level. Beast chakra resistance has gone up a level. The level up ones were repeated over and over again. Trembling, his body sagged for a moment before Hakai and Kij pushed through the pain and the exhaustion to keep him up. Thanks, he thought to them, pulling himself back together so that he could continue. We'll be right here, Kij told him, just in case. What the actual? How? Kakuzu asked before he tensed up as IG made a single hand seal. However, when nothing happened, he seemed to grow even more unnerved. IG simply grinned at him though, his teeth stained with blood. A smile that only grew larger when his opponent screamed. No. Some distance away, the man's detached mask was pierced right through by new ivory. IG had sent the legendary sword along with whiplash and chakra flow at that moment. He chuckled to himself, an action that only made more blood come out of his mouth as his body struggled to regenerate. Didn't expect that, did you, Stitch? He asked. What even are you? Kakuzu said, his voice tinged with something. Do you have any idea of how long I've lived? The things I've seen. And yet, you. What the actual fuck are you? IG simply laughed again. I'd like to know that myself, sometimes, he replied, taking a step towards the Akatsuki member. Now, die, would you kindly? And with that, he dashed back to the man. He was wary though, another attack like the last one would probably actually kill him. Especially if it hit something important. He'd actually only survived the first because his heart, spine and head were still fine. There was only so much that World Ender could make him live through though. The technique needed a body somewhat functional to power the regeneration, after all. That was entirely too close, he thought to himself as he attempted to hit Kakuzu once more. New ivory flew about powered by living thread and the occasional whiplash when he could get away with a hand seal. Kakuzu was now just as wary of him though, and with only a single heart remaining, he was unlikely to put his guard down in any way. I know your tricks now, Kakuzu said then. You can't be able to keep that up for long. You'll run out of chakra soon and then you are dead, he threatened. IG just laughed, even louder now that he was more and more healed by the second. You ain't seen nothing yet, he said, grinning widely as Sachigumo barked in his mind, affirming his words. He almost wished he could just let her out and really let loose. Or maybe that was just her projecting her own emotions. Regardless, it was oh so very tempting. That would have to wait though. And you never will, he added, flickering up to Kakuzu as he let out another sacred flock at the man. It did little, of course, but little was enough. Every piece of damage he did stacked on top of the other. Kakuzu could stitch himself back together, of course, and IG knew that. He also knew that he'd win the battle of attrition. Sachigumo could outlast this guy, and IG was much more confident that he could fight Kakuzu for a while now. With all but one of the guy's masks out, it reduced the danger considerably. IG's fist connected with the man's stomach. New ivory cut through the side of his chest. Another punch met the man's clavicle. The sword pierced through the left side of Kakuzu's torso. Really covering for that one weakness, huh? IG noted, more than a little frustrated. I can do this all day, Stitch, can you? He said, a grin spread over his face. No longer was blood coming out of his mouth, his wound getting better and better as the time passed. It was straining his body, to regenerate so much from basically nothing, but he could manage. Energy points were tickling down, but Kakuzu was getting weakened too. Because I don't think you can. Oh. You Jitonii. Goddamn were you annoying, Teiya complained, loudly and unnecessarily. She'd learned not to bother with the redhead too much though. It was both a lost battle and not worth the effort in the first place. Besides, Hayden had been very frustrating to fight against, even if the fight wasn't difficult or long. There was also the fact that Yujito was growing to respect the girl, much to her dismay. Foul-mouthed she might be, but Teiya was an accomplished genjutsu user. So much so that even with Matatabi's help it was becoming difficult to keep her illusions away from her mind. The Baijua had taken that as a challenge though, so there was fortunately little chance of Teiya getting too powerful. "Are you sure we shouldn't go help Ig?" Fu asked hesitantly, looking towards where that particular battle was going on. Yujito couldn't really blame her. After that lightning attack had occurred, even the usually stoic X-Sound members looked at least slightly concerned. Ig said not to. Kabuto said, although Yujito couldn't help but think that it should have been Tamrai the one to respond to that. His clone confirmed it. "We wait here," he added, frowning down at where Hayden laid on the ground, restrained not only with wire and seals, but also with Kabuto over him pumping him full of drugs to keep him down. All of them thought it a bit overkill. Even Ig had when they'd discussed the containment plan. However, none of them wanted to risk doing less than that much. As it was, the mission this time had been easy, Yujito thought. At least from her side. She didn't know how Ig was doing on his front, but she was reasonably certain that he was fine. He was scarily good at dodging attacks sometimes, so hopefully he'd dodged that one they'd seen and felt. "What about the traitor?" Jirobo asked this time, looking unusually angry. His brows were furrowed and his lips threatened to pull into a snarl. That was probably the most emotional Yujito had seen the boy be, actually. "Ig has that under control too," Tamrai replied, looking shaken but visibly trying to pull herself together. She was really worried that something might have happened to Ig, Yujito realized. She could see the gears turning in the girl's mind, probably thinking how they'd proceed if their leader had truly fallen. "I do," a familiar voice said from above them, on the trees. When she turned towards him with the rest of the team, Yujito felt her blood freeze inside her veins. "Take care of this for me, will you?" Ig added, letting something fall to the ground. They barely paid any mind to Kakuzu's body, which seemed to be sewed and tied up by new ivory. A lone thread making its way up to Ig, who seemed to be channeling chakra flow through the wire. The man looked more than a little unconscious though. Those were minor details, at best. Their whole focus was on Ig as he cracked his neck and took a deep breath in. Then the boy looked down at his upper clothing, or what remained of it. There was a big chunk of it and his armor missing on the right side of his chest. No way, Yujito thought, an idea of what might have happened there flashing through her mind. From there, his outfit was torn in lots of places, with holes, slashes and burns. In one motion, he shrugged off his upper clothing. It was after that when Yujito noticed something that she had missed. There was a hole in Ig's torso. On his right side, there was a hole the side of a fist that was closing slowly. "Well?" he asked, taking a bite of some rations that he'd taken out of one of his pouches. His red eyes focused on them and Yujito wasn't the only one to stand straight and immobile under his gaze. "I'm waiting." "We'll take care of that," Kabuto said, slowly and hesitantly. "Good," Ig said, his voice never having carried the weight it carried at that moment. Then it became even worse as they all felt his bloodlust wash over them, like the coldest of rivers was flowing around them. "I have a traitor to find," he said, looking ready to just flicker away before he paused and gave them another glance. This time it was like his eyes were seeing right through them. "Kabuto, you are in charge." And then he was gone. Yujito and the rest of the team remained frozen though, only their temporary leader moving to secure Kakuzu the same way he had hidden. The rest of them still couldn't shake the cold in their bones and the fear in their minds. They all knew Ig Sato was no normal ninja, but they'd been shown a completely new monster that day. Need any help? Teiya asked, voice more subdued than Yujito thought she could sound. Although, to be honest, she was surprised the girl could even talk at all at that moment. She herself felt stuck, unable to move. Her mind worked faster than ever though, remembering a conversation she'd had with their leader. Words that she hadn't placed too much weight on until that moment. Words that even her superiors had all but dismissed according to the response she'd gotten to her report. The nations may not want peace, but they fear war too much. If it'll keep the people I care about safe, I'll do my absolute best to be everyone's reason to keep the peace. Back then, Yujito had thought that was an exaggeration. She'd always known Ig was strong, of course. She held a healthy respect and fear for him. However, surely one person wouldn't be enough to cower the world into peace, right? At that moment, Yujito realized that it was entirely possible that Ig could achieve just that. That's it guys for now. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.